We believe that knowing the stories of early African Americans in our state allows us to really talk about not only their story, but how we got to where we are and why we do what we do around healing and creating an understanding and making our dialogues around race much easier. Ona Marie Judge was born in Mount Vernon in around 1774, and she was enslaved to George Washington and Martha Washington. Every 6 months, they would change their servants over. It was on one of those times that Ona just packs up and leaves, and she ends up in Portsmouth. One of these days, Ona was walking in downtown Portsmouth in the marketplace, and Elizabeth Langdon was also in the marketplace, and she sees and she recognizes Ona Judd, and she knows the Washingtons were looking for their runaway slave. And of course, she passes this information on to John Langdon, and Washington finds out that this indeed is where Ona ends up. This is how the John Langdon House becomes a part of Ona's story, part of the history, is when Washington sends his nephew, and they're at dinner, talking about, their desire to really capture Ona unexpectedly, put her on a ship and take her back to Pennsylvania. Cyrus Bruce, Governor Langdon's maitre d', was there, and they heard the story. And we know that Ona was warned about that this was happening, and we think it was Cyrus Bruce who actually warned her that the slave catchers were coming. Cyrus Bruce was known to be the most well-dressed man of color in Portsmouth.
Cyrus Bruce, I like to believe, was the guy of the door. Yes, he opened that door, he shut that door. He was in charge of the people knocking at that door. He was in charge. You could see that he has respect for himself and had a strong character.
He also held the same position among the enslaved people and free people of color in Portsmouth as Governor John Langdon. So he was very influential within that community. Ona Marie Judge escapes the president's home at least 3 times that we know about, and she is never caught. Washington dies before she could be free, or before she could be returned to him. She said she'd rather die free than live in such luxury. These stories, when we tell them, when we reintroduce them to our collective memory, helps us to really go beyond stereotypes, helps us to go beyond what we think a person is just by looking at the color of their skin. The Langdon House is also looking at its history of African Americans that had lived there, what their story is, and how those stories connect to the wider story of enslavement and freedom in our state. It's American history. It's a fuller, more complex history that we have to look at. And I think these historic homes are really starting to look at that. Who were the servants in the house? Like Cyrus Bruce, we have a silver tray that we know he used. But what was his story? Where did he come from? What was a Black community like in Portsmouth?
Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail at the Langdon House asked me to be the artist in residence to create an image of an invisible or faceless man, Cyrus Bruce, and I was thrilled. I was going to get the opportunity to make an invisible man visible.
It is through these material cultures, these houses that remain, the items that remain, the tray, the brick from the home in the back that Cyrus Bruce is supposed to have lived at, the silver buckle that we know he wore on his shoe. We're excited to work with Historic New England and their property Langdon House in Portsmouth, not only for the research that we can do, but also that we can actually go in, visit this property, see the house, be in that physical space. We usually tell Ona's story. We've not told Cyrus Bruce's story. And we want to imagine what a conversation between George Washington and Cyrus Bruce was like. We know that there was respect between John Langdon and Cyrus Bruce. But what is that? What is that relationship? These historic homes, putting people in those places in the past, in conversations that we thought could happen, broadens our imaginations and create these bridges of understanding.